has been a ton of news in the NBA over the last 72 hours that impact the Miami Heat in a pretty big way. We know Miami has been gearing up for the 2026 NBA offseason, looking to have flexibility in cap space in order to sign a key free agent. Well, over the last 72 hours, there have been two major extensions, Luka Doncic and De'Aaron Fox. And those two extensions do impact Miami because if you went down the list of potential players that were going to be available in free agency the following offseason that the Heat would want to have a max contract spot for, these would be your top two. So the fact they're off the board certainly changes the outlook that Miami has to have going into the rest of the offseason and into this next regular season. And before we talk more about how this stuff impacts the Heat, we are in the midst of an August like battle and we're off to a hot start. Only about 5 days into the month, and we have a almost 200 like lead. Hit that thumbs up icon for daily Heat content, but to also take down the 76ers and Celtics Chat Sports channel. So on Saturday, August 2nd, it was announced that Luka Doncic signed a 3-year, $165 million extension with the Los Angeles Lakers. It is a 2+1, so he will potentially be a free agent in 2028, but he is still going to be in Los Angeles at least the next 3 years until that fourth-year player option, because he's obviously under contract this year. But then yesterday, on Monday, August 4th, De'Aaron Fox signed a massive 4-year extension with the San Antonio Spurs. He gets a 4-year, $229 million deal, actually gets more money on an AAV basis than Luka Doncic, which is a little bit intriguing to me. I think it does have to fact in because Luka did 3 years instead of the 4-year contract extension he was eligible for, while De'Aaron did the full 4 years. But why is this big stuff for Miami? Well, as we briefly mentioned earlier in the show, both of these players were definitely players that Miami was targeting and keeping an eye on as a player they could have cap space for with a max slot in free agency next offseason. Now, I don't think they realistically thought that both would be available. Maybe they would have optimistic thinking that one of them would be a free agent, but that is obviously not the case. And this just hammer homes the point that if you want to acquire a true superstar inside the NBA, in this day and age with the CBA, you have to make trades to get the big time players. Miami has tried to make big time trades, but they have not ponied up enough or just not been willing to offer everything that has been asked of them. You obviously look at Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard over the last 4 or 5 years. Since they acquired Jimmy Butler, they really have not gone all in for an all-star caliber player. It is good to have cap space. It is good to have flexibility because it still does give you the opportunity to make trades and be a little bit farther away from the first apron, which gives you more you can trade, and it doesn't trigger that restriction on draft picks. But you simply can't count on NBA free agency in this day and age to acquire a superstar. The last time that a team acquired a superstar in free agency, it was 2 years ago with Paul George going to the Sixers, and it's been an absolute disaster. If you want to get a young star, you got to make a trade. And I want to ask you this. Are you shocked that both players, Luka Doncic and De'Aaron Fox, got extended? Type Y for yes or type N for no. I am surprised by one of them. I think Luka Doncic, even though I did make a video speculating, there is a very small chance that Luka could ultimately elect for free agency next offseason. I felt like he was always going to sign that 3-year extension and then give himself the ability to get another huge 5-year deal during that 2028 season. But I'll be honest, I am a little bit surprised by De'Aaron Fox extension. I know the Spurs sunk 4 first-round picks into him last trade deadline, and they viewed him as the point guard of the future, pairing up with Devin Vassell and Victor Wembanyama. But after they lucked into Dylan Harper by winning the lottery, moving up to that number 2 pick, I was curious to see if they would hold off on giving Fox the extension, see how Dylan Harper progresses, run with a young core of Harper, Stephon Castle, Vassell, and Wembanyama, and then trade De'Aaron Fox at the trade deadline this upcoming February to recoup some draft picks. I thought that was a very real possibility, but evidently that is not going to be the case. So after Luka and Fox officially extend with their respective teams, the free agency period in 2026, where Miami is slotted to have a solid amount of cap space, not a max slot, but they will have some cap space. Well, it just got a little bit more thin. Kevin Durant is yet to extend with the Houston Rockets, so he could still potentially be a free agent, but I doubt he ends up hitting the market. Trae Young has a player option, but I do feel like the Hawks are committing to Trae. Levine has a player option. I have a hard time believing he is going to opt out of that massive contract he has. James Harden is a player option as well, but I doubt he is going to opt out as well. But then here comes some of the top unrestricted free agents outside of KD. Kristaps Porzingis, Tobias Harris, Anthony Simons, John Collins, your own Norman Powell, and then Colin Sexton. So when you think of these players that are going to be available, maybe they extend, maybe they don't. But let's just say all the unrestricted free agents actually enter free agency. They are solid players. Like Norman Powell is a solid player. Colin Sexton is a solid player. John Collins is a solid player. Kristaps is a solid player. But when you think of what Miami needs to get over the mountaintop in the Eastern Conference to compete with the teams like the Boston Celtics, the Indiana Pacers, Cleveland Cavaliers, and then in the West, the Rockets and the Thunder, you need a true superstar. You need 3 top dogs. You only have maybe 2, and that is wishful thinking on Adebayo and Tyler Hero. So yes, you could sign one of those solid free agents, whether it's bringing back Norman Powell, going out and getting a John Collins or Colin Sexton. But that's not what Miami needs to really compete. They need another star alongside Hero and Bam. Someone to really shoulder the number one option, because Tyler, as good as he is offensively at times, he is not a true number one option. You needed that number one dog, which then slots Tyler into that number 2 spot offensively. Bam as your second best player, but third option offensively. And then that is how Miami can really start to contend again in the Eastern Conference. So the free agency class isn't where you're going to find one of those guys. And make sure you do subscribe to the channel, because whether it is news around the NBA that we are breaking down and how it impacts Miami, direct Heat news, or rumors surrounding this team, we will have you covered on a daily basis. Let's get to 24,350 subscribers today, so we need 40. Hit that sub button for daily Heat coverage. The problem that I am continuing to bring back into the equation here for Miami is if you have to make a trade to get a star, a top guy, and you can't do it through free agency, well, who will be that guy that potentially becomes available for Miami? And then if they do become available, does the Heat have enough assets to acquire them without gutting their entire roster? Well, when you think about 8 blockbuster trade targets that could potentially shake loose over the next year and a half, these are the 8 guys that come to mind the most. Giannis Antetokounmpo, although I believe he stays in Milwaukee, he is in the news as a potential guy. Trae Young has heavily been rumored about a trade. LaMelo Ball, if the Hornets continue to realize he is not a building block, could he be available? John Morant's had major rumors around him. The 2 forwards in New Orleans and Zion on Trey Murphy, Lauri Markkanen. And then obviously the biggest name here outside of Giannis is Anthony Edwards. But I don't really forecast him potentially asking out. Again, if we're going to be real with all 8 of those guys, I wouldn't label any of them as likely trade requests, as trade targets for the Miami Heat. The one that makes the most sense potentially is Lauri Markkanen if the Jazz don't want to continue to pay him that big contract they gave him last offseason. But even then, does it really make sense for the Miami Heat when you already have Bam Adebayo and Kel'el Ware in your front court? You'd probably be looking for a wing in like a Trey Murphy or a true guard to pair next to Hero or replace Tyler, like a Trae Young or John Morant or Anthony Edwards. But I don't know if any of those guys will actually be available on the trade market. We're rounding out the show here in a second, but grab your Heat hoodies on sale right now. It was $70, Now available for 35. How about that? 50% off. Sizes small, medium, large, extra large, and 2X all in stock. Get yours at chatsports.com/culture sale. Links in the description and comments of today's video. Now, the dream obviously would be a player like Anthony Edwards asking out because there has been a solid connection between him and Miami due to his relationship with Bam Adebayo at Team USA in the Olympics, his relationship with Eric Spoelstra. He was very complimentary of the Heat head coach during the Team USA Olympic period as well. But the problem is, I thought Ant could have asked out if Minnesota really tanked and fell off a cliff following Karl-Anthony Towns being traded. But guess what? They made the Western Conference Finals again. And until the Minnesota Timberwolves obviously can't compete, I feel like Anthony Edwards is staying. So if there's one player out of that 8-person list that I'm intrigued by, it is actually Trey Murphy III, who probably is the smallest name out of those 8 players we showcased. But this is a young guy absolutely on the rise. The former Minnesota Golden Gopher has just continuously improved every single year of his career. And he had the best year of his career this past season. Now, granted, it was on a really bad Pelicans team that dealt with a Brandon Ingram trade, DeJounte Murray and CJ McCollum injury, Zion Williamson out of the lineup. So Trey Murphy had an expanded role. But when you watch Trey Murphy play every single day, well, you get kind of the feeling that this is a budding NBA superstar. The way he's able to knock down threes from beyond the arc. I mean, he does it from deep. He can take you off the dribble. He's got unbelievable bunnies as well, where he can finish on top of you inside. This is a 3-level scorer that is continuously improving. He's really young, so he fits the Miami Heat timeline, and he's an interesting guy that I would be all in on potentially trading for. It would cost you a lot. It would cost you your entire draft capital plus some young guys. That is how good Trey Murphy is. But really, if we're going to be honest here, we could talk about a blockbuster trade all we want. The truth is, Miami's likely not going to make one anytime soon. So if the Heat want to get back to competing for an NBA title in the next 2 or 3 seasons, I think you're going to have one of your young guys blossom into a star to have a chance. We saw Tyler Hero take the step from high-level player to NBA fringe all-star type of guy. We know Bam Adebayo is a full NBA all-star caliber player. He's been there multiple times. So you have 2 at least fringe all-stars. Can you get a third? You get a third all-star. Well, now we're talking about a team that can really contend. So who is the most likely player that can take that next step up to join Bam and Hero as potential all-star players? You look at the young guys on the roster that you need to have a potential step up. You have Ware, Jovic, Hawkins, Jokic, and Pallel Larson. Now, I'll probably eliminate Pallel Larson and Jaime Jaquez Jr. from this group. I think both are solid rotational NBA guys. Larson could be a solid 7th, 8th man in your rotation. I think Jaquez is a solid 7th, 8th, 9th man as well. Nothing crazy special, but who knows? Maybe Triple J rebounds in his 3rd year, improves his 3-point shot, and becomes a very solid player off the bench for the Heat. But when you think about players that need to and could take that leap if everything clicks the right way, you're obviously hoping for Jovic, Kelal Ware, and then the rookie you selected in this year's draft, Kasparas Giacochonis. So I want to ask you this before I give you my answer and we round out the show. Out of these 5 players, which player is the most likely to somehow take that next step of development, become a star, an all-star level guy? Let me know your thoughts down below. If I had to pick 1 or 2 from that 5 young core list, it's probably going to be Kelal Ware and Giacochonis. And I imagine if the people stayed throughout this entire video and answered the question, Kelal Ware is probably going to be the most popular answer, considering he is 7 feet tall. He had a really good rookie year. You see the potential with his two-way ability, also spacing the floor offensively. Now, I don't know if he could ever be a true all-star, like handle the rock face-up game guy like you see some of these other all-star centers do, like Alperen Şengün, Joel Embiid, obviously, Nikola Jokic. Victor Wembanyama. Like, where is a very, very good young player? But does he have that type of on-ball offensive potential? I don't know, which is why I think Yakachonis would probably be my next answer. And although he really struggled in summer league, his size for the guard position at 6'5", 6'6", his playmaking ability, and when I watched his film in college, I know it was a little bit rough at summer league. His ability to make tough shots on step backs from beyond the arc, as well as make some tough shots inside, absorbing contact and getting to the free throw line, is traits that you can project at the next level. So I might not happen right away, but 19 years old, there is a chance with development and playing time in the G League and just overall in the NBA, this is a guy that could develop into something special for Miami. So if I had to pick out of the Heat's guys that are under 23, 24 years old, for those two, Kalaware and Yakachonis would probably be the two most likely guys that take that step to join Bam and Hero as all-star level guys. That'll do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed. And if you're still watching and aren't subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for because we're still making daily content in the dead parts of the off season in the month of August. So join the channel right now.